Welcome to Liturgical Shenanigans, a Wayfolk Arts podcast, with your hosts, Hannah,
Phil,
Jackson,
and Maddie.
Hi there, everyone. A brief editor's note as you engage this episode. We had our first instance of one mic going down. The audio gremlins struck in this episode, and Phil's audio for the first couple minutes will be very faint. But don't worry, by about minute 5, we caught the issue and addressed it, and from that point on, you can hear Phil just fine. The earlier parts, did the best I could. You should still be able to hear him at the significant moments where he jumps in. But it will be a little faint to start off with. With that said, let's jump into the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Liturgical Shenanigans.
Hello.
I thought we jumped in with a Baruch Atah.
I don't know.
Nice, sure, yeah.
No one knows what we just said.
Sure,
That's
they
not
do.
True. Someone knows.
Absolutely,
People
people.
do.
You all know. You all are with it, folks out there tuning into the show.
If you didn't know that was Hebrew, it was the start of a prayer.
A very particular prayer.
Yeah. My brain doesn't work tonight.
Blessed are you,
Thank
O
you.
Lord,
Yeah.
King of the big time, big space.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Ruler of the universe. But the first word is blessed,
Baruch.
which
Yeah.
is kind of what we're going to talk about tonight.
It is. Yeah, we figured it was about high time we turned the liturgical shenanigans focus on the word blessing itself. We've done an episode about what we mean by when we use the word liturgy. Great episode. Check it out if you haven't heard it yet. But we wanted to take a second. We're starting to notice that a lot of our modes of writing, both in the liturgies that we share on the show and also on the writings that we do on our social medias and put out as our liturgies of the month, a lot of them are blessings.
And it's because we're all waiting for our letters to Hogwarts. Blessings feel like magic.
Well,
Ooh, I like it.
as fun as that was,
it.
interestingly, blessings are for thresholds exactly like that.
Yep.
That's a rite of passage to, yeah. So yeah, it's definitely got some of that tone to it.
Harry Potter is #blessed.
to be a blessing. Yikes.
Yeah. And maybe that's a decent start off point is
Which
just
Harry Potter or blessed to be a blessing?
well, we I mean, if we jump into Harry Potter, we'll be here the whole time.
That's
true.
But the blessed to be a blessing, some of the like vernacular way bless has grown to be used recently, is a detriment to the word, to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
The kind of flippant way #blessed is used, or blessed to be a blessing.
Too blessed to be stressed.
I was about to
blessed
say
to be
that.
stressed. Yeah, there's so certainly there's like this kind of vernacular way to use the word that that has received a lot of use recently, and I think ultimately has lessened the weight of the word.
Yeah, it's become like a form of toxic positivity in a way. Or a way of saying your life blessed turns into your life is so good, to the point that only good can come out of you.
Yeah, or
Right.
you'll only experience good, or
Right.
Yeah, and it's also like we've had that toxic positivity of blessed around for long enough now that #blessed is now satire
Yes.
of toxic positivity too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and oftentimes it's used when somebody's just being honest about their current situation that's hard. So a couple episodes back when we did I just knocked my microphone so hard. I'm Italian and using my hands. Anyways, a couple episodes back when we did the infertility awareness episode, I talked about that line between hope and grief. It's a similar thing. Like, even when I talk about how I have a child, when I grieve how hard having a baby is, I often feel that I have to add, but I'm so blessed. Like, we're so blessed that Izzy was born. We're so blessed to be here. #blessed. I don't know. It's just, It's sad.
Am I back on now?
I think you are. We had
All
a
right.
brief moment where Phil faded away on the audio track.
Well, hopefully
so-
you can hear me better
He
now.
was so blessed, though.
I was so
so
blessed.
blessed.
Well, and that's what I wanted to talk about because I can get a little cynical about the use of blessing as far as how we use it in Christianese. Like when we say, this was such a blessing to me. We're not allowed to say lucky.
Right.
Yeah.
We tend to say, "Oh, I'm very blessed right now. God's been really good to me." And I think I can get like, are we just translating our words so that we sound Christian-y, or do we really know what we mean or want to mean when we say blessed as opposed to lucky? You've been such a blessing to me, as opposed to say a gift or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you also have the instances of blessing being used as like almost a weapon, a way to exert your interpretation of what someone should do into their lives, which at its in one facet of what blessing is for, and in the best version of it, can be a helpful thing, but most of the time when people are using it, it's a painful thing. It's their perception. I was interacting with someone the other day, and they told me the story about how they were like this blessing was spoken over them, and it included like, you need to break up with this boyfriend that you're with because he's making you ask all these questions about the faith and the way you're showing up in the world, and you just need to go to this college and meet someone else. And that's just a stark weaponization of a blessing to try to control someone.
That's not a blessing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's not
Well,
a blessing.
Yeah,
In a more Pentecostal tradition, I could see that being like a word.
a word
Yeah.
spoken
Yeah.
over, a
Or
word of
something like
power
that.
or something.
But even that, I have a really difficult time when I don't consent to receiving a blessing, even when it's not crazy like that. Even
Right.
when it's lovely and so well intentioned, I think it's an intimacy thing, maybe.
Yeah.
But often, like, it involves someone touching you, and I already have a really hard time with that. I think consent with blessing is important. I mean, and nobody can control what somebody does internally, right? If you feel really compelled to bless me or someone internally, fine. Please, for me at least, I would rather you not just approach me and speak a blessing over me. It makes me super uncomfortable and anxious.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
Probably because it's intimate.
Intimacy? Sure.
Yeah,
that
or
makes sense.
there's this vulnerable position, and I don't know what you're going to say, and do I want? I don't know.
It's something you can't control.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that in an accusatory way, but that's a thing. Like, I keep thinking about all like the stories of the biblical patriarchs giving blessings over their children, and that the children never knew what the patriarch was going to say over them, and sometimes it was a really hard word, and sometimes it was incredible, and sometimes it was like, how on earth could I live up to that? And if you don't know what they're going to say, and if you imagine blessing as the thing that has a lot of power, that's a terrifying
it's a casting
moment.
of a spell.
Yeah, it's a casting of a spell. You would you wouldn't want someone to just blindside you with a blessing.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. Sometimes angels do that too.
Well,
Virgins?
Angels are horrifying. I don't want to be visited by one.
Blessed are you.
Well, yeah, and so the kind of scariness of a blessing is like so valid a way to express it, because we do a lot of talking on the show about stuff, spiritual stuff, and a lot of times we like try to like I don't know, we haven't gone real mystical on this show all that often.
that's true.
And there is something odd and mystical about blessings where your soul is being brought into the equation. and something about your eternal self is being talked to in a blessing. And that is something super vulnerable and something that someone can't just drop in out of the clear blue sky and have the authority to do on over your life necessarily. Maybe an angel could. I don't know. I'm not talking to angels. But
It's a thing that someone's bestowing upon you.
Yeah.
And I think too, what I have to remind myself of is I have to receive it for it to really have power, and I can refuse to receive it. It doesn't make it less. I just get a yuck feeling.
Sure.
Well, it is a really vulnerable act, regardless. Anytime you receive a blessing, anytime you give a blessing. I mean, we are people who write blessings quite frequently, and I don't know. I'm in a season right now of like anytime I sit down to write a blessing, I like am intimidated by that space because it is such a blessings are intended for moments of threshold, and threshold is different than transition, different than like a lot of times the phrase "I'm in a season of transition" is used, and there can be blessings for a season of transition, but blessings as applicable to a threshold season is really different, because thresholds are, if you follow the root of threshold, there's threshing involved, and threshing involves taking chaff off of wheat and being left with wheat. So you're moving from a season into a new thing, into something different. And it's not always a good thing, but you're stepping through a doorway, you're getting your Hogwarts letter. And so that
like a moment when like the world changes.
Yeah, something is changed. When a blessing is spoken, there is real power of change happening in the moment and happening as a result of you speaking that blessing. And that makes blessing one of the most powerful things humans have been entrusted with, to have the power to affect change. If you again, we're dipping our toes into like something a little bit, you can't like prove that this is happening, but the ability of a blessing to speak to someone's soul in a moment of change and in a threshold moment affects that threshold moment in a really meaningful way and speaks to the eternal part of that person that is going through that moment. So it's one of the most powerful things that we have the ability to interact with. It's one of the most eternal things that we have the ability to interact with as humans. And that's just so much more gravity than #blessed.
Yeah. So many things that resonate in all the things that you just said. But it also makes me think of one of the Tom Bogart, who is an Old Testament scholar, is a retired professor. I got to be in one of his classes, and he would often talk about the power of the Word of God, that all of reality flows from the mouth of God. And as you said, one of the gifts God has given humanity is sort of this parallel act of creation. Like God created the world through God's word, and we have been given the power of speech. We have been given the power to speak life into other people. We have also been given the power to speak destruction into other people. But what beautiful creative power that you, like, all of that gravity, like you have the ability to change people with your words. And blessing feels like blessing used properly feels like one of the most important, weighty, powerful versions of that ability to speak life into another person.
Yeah, and creation as one of those waypoints or waystones of God's interaction with us as a blessing. Life and creation as the original blessing also puts blessing within a bigger context as well. When you are blessing, you're joining the act of creation, you're joining the act of life, you're recalling to yourself that you are alive, that the biggest that a significant blessing in your life is the fact that life exists for you.
Yeah.
And that's another like high gravity thing that is at work in the moment of blessing. So you mentioned Tom Bogart, a great Old Testament scholar. I'm drawing a lot of my it would be pointless for me to try to cite some of what I'm saying with how much I am just borrowing wholesale from John O'Donohue, who wrote a great book, To Bless the Space Between Us, or Benedictus in the European version. And just
John O'Donohue is an Irish
Yeah.
Celtic spirituality scholar, theologian, sort of mystic. Jackson, what would you call him?
For sure. He was a priest. He was a philosopher. He
Thank
did a
you.
lot of work around blessing. He did a lot of work around poetry and a lot of work around death and befriending death. He died. He wound up dying quite young. He was writing about death before he would have known that he was going to die, obviously. But he did a lot of work around the liminal space of life and how to interact sacredly with that space.
It's unfortunate that I think so many people, their only understanding of what blessing is hashtag blessed to be a blessing or too blessed to stress, hashtag blessed. Because when we bestow a blessing upon anyone, if you don't understand the weight of that, it doesn't change the fact that you've done the thing. It doesn't change God's ability to move in that blessing, but it might change how you receive it and what it means to you, which is kind of a bummer. I think I'm thinking particularly of if we haven't done a good service to our youth before graduation Sunday, like we just talked about last week, and then we're going to bless them for graduation. We should do more liturgical catechesis of what it means
Right.
to be blessed, to give a blessing, to receive a blessing before we actually do it. I think it would change how people might interact or choose not to interact with the ritual.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
As I was like kind of thinking toward this episode tonight, I was reading some more of O'Donohue, and I just the thought of like being asked to give a table blessing, or bless the meal. Like, how often have I cringed at being asked to do that?
Me too, and I cringe when people do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Ooh.
yeah, it was kind of a moment of like, why am I cringing at this? And I think it's because I have a weak muscle, a limb that has not been, trained to show up to that moment. And like, what if we're all people who like sacramental food and the sacrament? What if instead of just launching into thanks for the food and that we're all together today, bless this food to our bodies, etc., what if you took a moment and said, this is a moment of eternity? Where suddenly our souls could have the opportunity to awake to the eternity of this moment, that we are sharing food together, that our universes, the universes of the people around this table for this moment, have collided, not just in community that is happening, not just in sustenance that is happening, but in a sort of strange connection of family. And family, I'm using that term very broadly in the sense that for this meal, we are a family. God bless this time. That's a really different way than I have shown up to that blessing.
Well,
Absolutely.
And I think for me, often when I've experienced table blessings, it just feels like a required duty.
Yeah.
Right. It's like a box you have to check before you
eat.
You get
And then you
to
feel-
And you're
eat.
hungry.
You're
Right.
inevitably I'm always the person that's already halfway through the meal, and someone's like, "Hold on, y'all, let me bless this meal," and I'm
Right.
like, "Oh no, I've messed up." Yeah, and I've been in circles where that is very much a practice every single time we eat together, and it always makes me uncomfortable, and I always feel like there's something wrong with me, but I do think it's that. It doesn't feel like we're actually participating in a blessing. It feels like we're participating in a box being checked. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I also think it's another consent thing for me too. You've just told me I'm not allowed to eat until you get to do this thing that's important to you. And I don't know that you and I have a similar understanding of what this even means. And so why do I have to participate in it?
Yeah.
And I'm the bad Christian if I do. Yeah, that's just
There's something right next door to that I'm going to try to draw the bridge into the kind of move of like books like Every Moment Holy or the liturgies that we write.
Yep.
They're with this probably isn't news to anyone listening. With the recession of the institutional church as something that ties people together in community, moments like that are so common. People enter into a moment where someone is imposing a ritual that they do not adhere to anymore, that they don't they don't understand the purpose for, and it's not a meaningful moment. And yet there is something in us that when we cross thresholds desires something. And so what some of the work that we try to do with our liturgies and the work that books like Every Moment Holy have done very well, books like To Bless the Space Between Us by John O'Donohue has done very well, is with a high level of consent, because it's a book and you get to read it in the moment that you want it to. Claim the sacramental, the eternal in ordinary, everyday things like your first cup of coffee for the moment that you're exhausted and still needing to go on. For all these sorts of moments that need something, where you know your soul is thirsty for something, where you know your whatever piece of eternity is in you is thirsty for something. Blessings can speak into those moments. And so an interesting thing is to try to figure out how to like also then build community around those sorts of things.
Well, and I have been in circles where also like the table blessing specifically becomes a form of evangelism.
Right.
So if there's someone in our home who isn't a Christian, then we should do this because maybe they'll hear the Spirit and come to Jesus this way. Or always doing it in public at a restaurant because it might bless someone else to hear this blessing.
Yeah, someone might overhear.
Which is not what it is for. We are called to evangelism. I do believe that. Perhaps what that word means is different in Maddie land than it is in someone else's land. But yeah, oh man, so many things are coming up inside me about blessing that I didn't even know were there.
Can I poke at something?
Yeah. A bear? Sorry.
Yeah. When we say it's not what it's for, it is. I mean, like that, with that family or those people.
Well, right. For me, I'll rephrase.
It's
not what that means to me.
Yeah, and I mean to word police it, but I just noticed that, and I agree. And so, yeah, this whole thing about blessing, it's like love, where the culture, even individuals, will mean very different things when they say the word at different times. Where someone sneezed and I say bless you, maybe I really am like, hey, you know, your health, you're here. You know, I sometimes I probably am conscious of that, but most of the time, it's what we say.
Right.
Yeah. And when we talk about other things, like you've been a blessing, or and I think for folks like us and maybe our listeners who think deeply about these things, to see it taken in a way that feels less mystical, cheaper. Is that what I heard? Yeah. That it's somewhat frustrating and painful, particularly when we see it being used in ways that feel like a part of our past that we're trying to grow beyond or be different from.
I actually think I'm going to take back my take back. I do mean that's not what it's for. And I say that pretty firmly because I am also a Christian, and these are Christian circles misusing what we Christians really mean by blessing. Like there's like some miseducation. Is that a word? Man, I've been miseducated horribly on so many things. But I actually think it is okay for me to say, no, that's not what that's for. But that doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't meaningful, right? Like you're doing something that you think is meaningful and lovely in a form of evangelism. that is not what blessing as we mean it in our Christian tradition intended for it to be. Yeah. And I do think we have a responsibility as ministry leaders, as people who were privileged to be seminary educated, as people who went through ordination processes, to make sure that the masses of Christians know this is what God empowered us to do, and this is what we are entrusted with, and how it is being used is a misuse of what God has given us, and that is problematic. So I don't take it back. But
It's compelling.
I say that behind a microphone, right? I don't yeah.
I think where I would land differently on that is, and it's I think the way that we are shaped and called to approach church and people, because I think I totally agree with you, and this totally different point, because I think where I want to land in this is recognizing. I think I'm more cynical than you.
Are you?
I think I can't. I don't know about believe, assume, something like that. That when you said, I can't remember the word you used, like hordes or like all of these Christians, the big group of Christians,
The masses.
masses of Christians, and I'm like, I don't know that we even mean the same thing there.
Maybe
you know?
not.
And so like when I think about like these people haven't been taught, yeah, they have, and that's not what it's for. Yeah, it is. Like that there's a whole, I think if I was in the whatever fortunate, blessed opportunity to be in a conversation that was two-way, where we were listening and trying to understand each other, I would want to recognize, okay, so what need are you meeting, through this? What longings, is there an anxiety? Is there a have to? Like when we talk about, say, communion or baptism and the difference between an ordinance and a sacrament, right? Like we do this thing because we are supposed to, because God wants us to be obedient, because this is what and who God is. And we have this other thing in more Reformed-y Presbyterian world where, that it's a sacrament, that this is God acting, and it's not about our obedience as much as it is us observing God in this beautiful moment, which sounds to me like how we're talking about blessing. That it seems to me that even though we are, like you're talking about this powerful thing that we get to speak into and impact eternity, at the same time, it really feels observational. Like we're talking about mindfulness. We're talking about in the sitting with a cup of coffee and the whatever it may be, we're waking up.
Yes.
And we're seeing the beautiful majesty, dignity, power, intimacy, beauty of the moment, of the holiness of the moment, and joining God and creation in attesting to it.
Yeah, join the song.
Yeah.
Non-violent of you. Also, as you said the phrase "these people," I'm noticing that I'm not meaning to put people into us versus them categories as I explode about. Okay, well, I'm not meaning to.
Sure.
As I explode about blessing. It's just that I have always been so uncomfortable in the presence of table blessings, and internally I'm having oh my gosh, this is why. And now I feel very like I need to burn it to the ground
And that voice is super important
and make
needed.
it the correct thing.
Fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also, if you're hearing this and you love the table blessings and you feel really called to do them publicly, this does not change the goodness of your personhood. I still love you. And I'm just having a moment over here.
Well, and hear Maddie say, you are part of the us, and we want to
Yes.
be a
Yes.
family
I want
and
us
together.
all to be doing this beautiful thing together.
Yeah.
The way that I feel God intended it to be done.
The way that you have experienced, meaning and truth and healing.
And maybe when the table blessing is happening, that is what is intended, and I am just not in a place that I'm sitting and basking in it and waking up to the meal we're about to eat. Who knows? But
My brain had a thought it wanted to add. just
I'm
like
sorry.
a tiny a tiny baby thought to add to Phil's beautiful little rant about it's not a rant, I just don't have a better word.
I felt ranty.
Sure. About the blessing being sort of like a waking up and giving voice to what's in front of us. I feel like blessings are also like, because they are these things that happen on thresholds, like Jackson talked about earlier. They're like both for right now, let's wake up to this moment, and let's look forward to the future. And I feel like that is also one of the ways that blessing has power that can be misused or used beautifully and intentionally, especially if you know the person really well, to like both either name a longing that you both have for that person's future, or to speak something like I don't have a word for this, but like a word of calling for that person, like to say, I see this seed in you right now, and here is how I hope that one day it comes into its full bloom. I can see the potential in you. Let me give you a vision of what that potential might be too. That is one of the reasons I love blessing and have started using it so much more often, and just within the last couple of years, and have experienced like the couple times that people have actually spoken a blessing over me, because that's a practice in one group that I was part of. It's so powerful for someone to say, I see this thing in you.
And that the language of may or let or the vocative that. All of these are blessing words,
Right?
And it's a kind of a fun thing to wake up to as well, is how often just pay attention sometime to how often in liturgical settings those words are used. They might not be said straight up with a blessing, but they're often calling into this this noticing and hoping that somehow we can cast a vision for what we've noticed.
I'm also thinking about, I used to get so frustrated as a ministry leader when I was in committee meetings or session meetings, which is fancy church lingo for like the way the government structure in a church works. Just meetings of
Like elders and such.
leaders of churches together to make big decisions.
The board.
Yeah.
The board.
When people would refuse to bless their time together out loud because it made them anxious. And actually, I think they had it right. Of course, that's an anxiety-producing thing. Perhaps I, as someone who has to do it all the time as part of their job, you almost become numb to it, and it loses its meaning, kind of, in a sense. Obviously not totally, since I just exploded about it 2 seconds ago. But it makes perfect sense to be anxious to do it out loud. That is a big ask, and not everybody is going to feel comfortable. And I will say, I am someone who can be a little bit judgmental when someone is blessing a space about the way they're doing it or what the words that they speak, which is messed up, but it's just true. I am. And that makes it even more anxiety producing to have to speak a blessing in a potentially judgmental person's presence.
Yeah, it puts me in mind of a story again, one of O'Donoghue's stories, and he tells it better than I will. So I will do my best here. But O'Donoghue, as a young priest, went and visited an abbey, and spoke to one of the first people he interacted with was one of the nuns there, and he talks about how nervous he was going there to kind of learn about blessing and learning about centering and learn about how to be just a more contemplative Christian. And he showed up, and immediately this nun knelt before him and asked him to bless him. And so he summoned up all of his training that he could, the very young priest trying to like figure out the best way to bless this person. And he like noticed in himself this like, how can I possibly bless this person who spends their whole life contemplating how to be present to a moment like this? And he did the best that he could, and then immediately he said he knelt in front of this person and asked her to give him a blessing. And he tells the story of how she was overcome with nerves and stammered out something, tried to say something, and then ran out of the room. And he tells this story as part of what he views as a mission. And this is like, I'll finish the story before I go off on a tangent. What he views as the call of those who give blessings, empowering others to give blessings as well. Because though this person who in his mind was the person he was there to learn from, was the person who knew how to be contemplative and to give a blessing, she had not been offered the chance to. And so with that story, it's so close. This is the subtle corruption of the phrase "blessed to be a blessing." Is that you are in fact supposed to bless people so that they can go out and
bless
continue
others
and wake people up to the eternity, to the love, to the all the things. And it's so much more than hashtag blessed to be a blessing.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's the out of response to God's abundance, we can go out and be abundant or whatever, which
Power and,
is beautiful. And we've made it so shallow
Yeah.
because we've made it toxic positivity. It's you being blessed, you being bestowed abundantly by God does not equal your life is perfect. So go out and always be joyful. Christians, no one, but just because we proclaim Christ as God, whatever, does not equal our life is going to be faultless. And if our life isn't faultless, it doesn't mean that we're not being blessed. And there's the both andness of life with God. And we are so uncomfortable being in that space that for many, it is easier to say, I am blessed, therefore I am not stressed. And everything is good. And I'm only going to focus on how good things are. And because I have it so good, I'm going to help other people see how good they have it. And it's just, it's not, it's not great. And it's inauthentic for everybody involved.
I'm going to let a piece of my almost completely closeted evangelical out. And
Almost completely.
I don't know, but you know, it's a part of the formation, so it's there. And YouTube has decided what I need to do is watch a bunch of clips from The Chosen.
Sure.
Have you watched the show or clips from
I
it?
haven't, but people really want me to watch
I know, and then
it,
you're
which
like, I'm not
automatically
supposed to.
makes me
And the people
resistant.
that want you to watch it are the people that want you to watch church shows, and it's like, no, you're not going to get me.
but
I'm not
also-
listening
But
to
I've heard
Joy,
it's
whatever
good.
it is,
Yeah.
FM.
But also,
I've heard it's not like a church
some
show.
good artsy people have also.
Oh, some good, as
Yes,
opposed to the
yes.
Christians listening to this.
No, it's just
no.
I'm gonna.
But anytime anybody tells me I need to watch something, I'm automatically.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So The Chosen.
I have not watched the whole show, although I probably am getting close with how many
Right.
clips I watched.
Not a Facebook
Just
clips,
totally
yeah.
out of sequence. And it's captivating.
Well acted.
I love the way that this whole, yes, the Jesus actor and the community, but the story, the way it's very, very human, very, very human, and lovely, without taking away, like, it's not like there's no miracles or anything. They're there. And one of the compelling things that I saw this week was little James comes to Jesus and has a crutch and has a limp and has a bad leg,
It's Tiny Tim.
and Jesus has sent them in pairs to go do their thing and heal and such. And there's this montage, at least I think it could have been an edit for all I know that someone made with music, but it was like a montage of healing that all the little pairs are doing and them being overcome as wow, I did this thing, and looking at their hands like, wow. And there's this beautiful scene between little James and Jesus where he's like, I know, like, he's never asked to be healed, but now he's going to go out and heal, and expects, like, how can that be okay? And he's like, I could right now, of course we could just heal you, and then you would have this story about this amazing healing that you could go and celebrate and tell others. And there are a bunch of people that have that story. You, and it's this, he's like, you will, the time's coming. It will come. But think of what you can show by being this person who has not been healed and yet brings this good news to people and heals them.
I have feelings about that.
I know. And it's like, Jesus. And luckily this Jesus is super, super charismatic. And I'm watching it, I'm like, yeah, that's good. And little James doesn't stop crying. And that's kind of how it ends. And it's, that said, that came up in me as a memory as we're talking about this blessed to be a blessing thing, and that, to go biblical again, Jesus sent people out to do the work of blessing, of healing, of spreading the good news. I think we often think of it as like the Great Commission. Jesus did his thing, then the Holy Spirit came and they went out. But it was like during the ministry. It's part of active ministry. It's not. I'm gonna train up my people. I'm gonna train up my church people, my youth I work with, my whatever, so that when they're done with me, they go out. It's like, no, we're doing this now. Like
As you are.
We're working. Yeah, we're working on. This is what it means to be a part of the church.
Oof, and it might mean you do it wrong.
Yeah, it will. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And that happens in the story too. They come back and like, hey, we didn't do this right. And Jesus is like, well, stop eating. And that's probably
I didn't
not
come
the
here
lesson
to
we
be
wanna take away.
convicted.
Oh, sorry.
But hopefully you all did.
By me.
But that's the vision for the church, I think. And I think we can often get the pastors are the people who do the ministry, and we come and sing the songs on Sunday and put our money in the plate for them to do the Jesus thing. And that's not what it is. No. Christians are little Jesuses.
Yeah.
That's what Christian means, little Christ.
Everybody.
And so little bit, we are teaching each other, we're feeding each other bread, we're growing. And
We're sowing seeds.
yeah.
Yeah. Phil.
Blessed to be a blesser.
That's a nice riff.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We are nearing the end of our time on this particular episode. It's been another long one. Y'all are welcome.
Hashtag blessed.
So we're gonna likely continue this conversation over on our after show. So if you are hungry for more conversation around blessing,
Where Phil is likely to read some midrash.
Yep.
Ooh,
About
okay.
Genesis.
Okay.
well, certainly.
Yeah. Great.
Oh my gosh.
You can find it on Patreon. We have a Patreon, as those who are now longtime listeners of the show. I think I can
is
now
this
move
episode
into long
16?
time. 16 or
think so.
17? 16, yeah.
Wow, sweet 16. My sweet
yeah.
16.
Yep.
Amazing.
Anyone
So
else watch that show?
Mean
Just
it.
me?
No.
no. Someone out there probably has.
If you have, join us on Discord and tell us about what Maddie's talking about.
It's an
We'd love to
MTV
hear
show. Back in my day.
Yeah, join us on the Discord, join us on the social medias, or join us on patreon.com/wayfolkarts. Different than the title of the show, I know. You can find us over there. A number of different tiers of patronship. The lowest tier, you get access to the after show, which is a great time. We get a little bit more unhinged, if you can imagine that, and have continued conversation about the episode of the week.
Oh.
You basically get an entire second episode.
An entire other podcast.
If you just give us $5.
But what about second podcast?
Also, you
Doesn't
can
quite work.
find blessings that we all write
Yeah.
on www.wayfolkarts.com. You can also find them on Instagram, Wayfolk Arts, Facebook, Wayfolk Arts. Not the other social media. We abolished the third social media that exists. Yeah, and like Jackson said, the name is different because we are Wayfolk Arts. I don't think we've ever really...
I haven't really dug into that too much, but yeah.
One day we will. We are Wayfolk Arts. we bring you liturgical shenanigans.
Yes.
We bless you with liturgical shenanigans.
But come read our blessings. I wrote a blessing for a dandelion, and there's also a blessing somewhere in there for writing recipe cards. And it's
There's
just
all sorts
I
of
had
it-
so
all
much
sorts
fun,
of
you
it.
guys.
Last week on the
so good.
Patreon, you got a blessing that's not on any of those things. So if you
It's
join
true.
Patreon,
Yeah.
we kept a blessing.
Meanwhile, all the preachers listening are like, land the plane. Land
Yeah,
the plane.
sorry.
Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Liturgical Shenanigans.
Thank you. Bye.
Sorry, I don't know why that came out of me. It was like a pterodactyl.
I was blessed by it.